The alien slave girl was ready for her last breath, until a human's hands pulled her back to life. The war was over, or at least that was what the silence claimed. Smoke curled from the blackened earth. Metal wreckage lay twisted like bones. The air still tasted of blood and burning fuel. Nothing moved, no birds, no wind, no voices. Only the faint crackle of dying flames broke the stillness. Koresh lay on her back, armor shattered, her chest rising in shallow, painful breaths. Her left arm refused to move. Her right leg was pinned under a fallen transport plate. The glowing blue blood of her people seeped from a wound in her side, soaking into the dirt. She turned her head slowly. Bodies of her fellow warriors lay in broken lines, their weapons scattered, their eyes glassy and empty. On the other side of the battlefield, the humans dead were piled just as high. This was not a victory for either side, only a grave. Closed her eyes. She had fought bravely. She had not run. That was enough. Death would come quickly now, and she would greet it with the dignity of a warrior of the Zilari. A crunch of boots on ash broke through her fading thoughts. Koresh's eyes snapped open. Through the haze, a figure moved, tall, broad-shouldered. Human. His helmet was missing, revealing a face streaked with soot and dried blood. He was limping, his uniform torn, his left arm in a makeshift bandage. His eyes scanned the ground, searching. She tensed, her hand twitching toward the knife, still strapped to her thigh. She could barely lift it, but she would not let him take her alive. The man's gaze found her. For a moment, he froze. Enemy. That was what she saw in his dark, weary eyes. But there was something else to something she did not understand. He knelt beside her, his shadow falling over her face. "You're still breathing," he said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Koresh bared her teeth. "Finish it," she rasped in broken human tongue. The man looked down at the wound in her side. Instead of reaching for a weapon, he pulled a small pouch from his belt. He took out a metal flask and poured water over her wound, washing away the blood. She hissed in pain, glaring at him. "You're going to die out here," he said, not unkindly. She narrowed her eyes. "Good." He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he pushed the heavy plate off. Her leg with a grunt. She gasped as the pressure lifted, feeling blood return to the limb. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp even through her weakness. "Not leaving you here," he said simply. Her mind reeled. Was this a trick? Humans took prisoners, yes, but they did not treat enemies gently. She had heard the stories. They would chain her, torture her, break her spirit. She would rather die now. He slid his arms under her, lifting her from the ground with surprising strength despite his injuries. She struggled weakly, but his grip was firm. "Put me down," she growled, though her voice lacked power. "Not a chance," he replied. He began to carry her across the ruined field. The stench of war surrounded them, smoke-charred flesh, scorched metal, but his breathing was steady, focused. Every step seemed to cost him pain, but he didn't stop. "Why?" she whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed forward, scanning for danger. Finally he said, "Because I'm tired of watching people die." Her heart pounded. She didn't know what to make of that answer. They reached the edge of the battlefield where the forest began. The shadows of the trees swallowed them, hiding them from any patrols that might pass. He lowered her gently to the ground, leaning her against a thick trunk. "Rest," he said, opening a small kit and pulling out bandages. She tried to push his hands away, but her strength was gone. He worked quickly, wrapping the wound in her side with strips of cloth. His touch was careful, not the rough grip of a captor, but the deliberate movements of someone trying to save a life. When he was done, he sat back, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You'll live," he said. Koresh stared at him, searching his face for the trap. But all she saw was exhaustion and a strange determination she couldn't place. The man shifted to sit beside her. "Name's Marcus." She didn't respond. Giving her name to an enemy was unthinkable. He didn't press. "We move at dawn," he said. "Somewhere safe. You won't make it if we stay here." She wanted to tell him she didn't care, that she'd rather die than follow a human anywhere. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Marcus leaned, his head back against the tree, and closed his eyes. Koresh watched him in silence, her thoughts tangled. She had been ready to die. She had already said goodbye to her life, and yet, here she was, breathing still because of him. Her eyelids grew heavy. Before darkness claimed her again, she heard his voice, quiet and steady, as if speaking to himself. "Stay alive. Just stay alive." Warmth, that was the first thing Koresh felt. Not the freezing bite of night air on the battlefield. Not the weight of metal crushing her leg. But soft warmth like the inside of a living creature. Her eyes opened slowly. She was lying in a bed. Not a cot, not a military bunk, but a real bed with a thick blanket. A human-made blanket, stitched from rough fabric, but smelling faintly of wood smoke and soap. Light spilled through a small square window, turning the dust in the air into drifting gold. She bolted upright, then winced. Pain shot through her ribs, reminding her of the wound. Her armor was gone, replaced with a loose shirt far too big. For her breathing quickened. This was not a prison cell, not a human hospital. The walls were wood, not metal. There were shelves lined with jars, tools, and a cracked mirror. She had been moved. The door creaked. Koresh tensed, her hands gripping the blanket like a weapon. Marcus stepped in, carrying a steaming bowl in one hand and a folded towel in the other. His eyes flicked to hers, gauging her mood. "You're awake." Her gaze darted to the door behind him, judging the distance. She could run, maybe, but her body screamed with weakness. He walked over, setting the bowl on a small table beside her bed. The smell of cooked grain and herbs rose into the air, making her stomach twist, not with fear, but hunger. "Eat," he said simply. "I'm not your pet." She snapped, her alien accent sharpening the words. "Good," Marcus replied, without hesitation. "Pets don't survive wars." She blinked at him, unsure if it was an insult or something else. He sat down on the other side of the room, leaning back in a chair. He didn't touch her, didn't force the food into her hands. He just waited. The silence grew heavy. Koresh's mind raced. She had been trained to resist interrogation, to guard her mind and her loyalty. But this strange calm felt more dangerous than chains. Finally, she reached for the bowl, pulling it close. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask for thanks. First bite was hot enough to burn her tongue, but she kept eating. She hated how much her body craved it. "Where am I?" she demanded between mouthfuls. "A safe place," Marcus said. She narrowed her eyes. "Safe for who? You or me?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "Both, I hope." Something in his tone made her pause. He wasn't lying, at least, not completely. "You could have left me to die," she said. "I could have," Marcus agreed. "But I didn't." That answer was too simple, too human. She wanted him to say more, to reveal his real reason. "People didn't save enemies without wanting something in return. You'll regret it," she said finally. "Maybe," Marcus replied, standing, "but not today." He walked to the door, then glanced back. "Get some rest. You'll need your strength if you want to walk out of here alive." The door shut behind him, leaving her in the quiet room once again. Koresh stared at the bowl in her hands. She didn't trust him, not yet, maybe not ever. But she couldn't deny this. Her heart no longer beat with the slow rhythm of someone waiting for death, somewhere deep inside. The smallest spark had returned, and that terrified her more than the war ever had. Koresh sat on the bed, watching the wooden door. It had been hours since Marcus left. The sun had shifted in the window, and the room had grown warmer, but her thoughts stayed cold. Why? That single question gnawed at her like hunger. When the door finally opened again, Marcus stepped inside with a bundle of firewood under one arm. He didn't speak right away. He dropped the wood into a bin near the small stove, struck a match, and lit the fire. The smell of burning pine filled the room. Koresh broke the silence. "You saved me." "Why?" Marcus didn't look up. He fed another log into the fire. "Because you were alive." "That is not a reason," she said sharply. He sighed and finally met her eyes. "It's the only one I've got." Her brow furrowed. "Your kind kills mine without hesitation. My kind kills yours. It is the way of war. I'm tired of." "The way of war," Marcus replied. His voice was low, steady, but there was something inside it, like a locked door she couldn't see past. Koresh tilted her head. "You speak like someone who has lost." Marcus didn't flinch. "I have." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, filling the silence. She studied his face, the lines etched by exhaustion, the small scar at his jaw. "You think saving me will undo what happened to you?" He shook his head. "No, nothing will undo it. But I can decide what I do next." Her instinct screamed not to trust him. Trust was a weapon in war, one she'd seen used to gut the careless. But something about him unsettled her. He didn't talk like a soldier anymore. He talked like a man standing at the edge of something, trying to decide if he should jump. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, testing her weight. Pain rippled through her side, but she forced herself up. Marcus moved forward instantly, reaching out to steady her. "Don't touch me," she snapped, stepping back. His hands dropped to his sides. "Fine, but you're not ready to walk far." "I am ready enough to leave," she said. Marcus studied her for a long second. "You leave now, you die. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because I've seen what's out there. Patrols, hunters, people who would pay to hand you over." Koresh's jaw tightened. "Better to die free than live in a cage." Marcus's eyes darkened. "You think I'm a cage?" "You're human," she said simply. "That is enough." A shadow passed over his face. "Hurt, maybe, or something." Darker, but when he spoke again, his tone was calm. "You'll change your mind." She lifted her chin. "You think I'll trust you?" "I think you'll see that not every human wants you dead," Marcus said. "And maybe you'll realize you're not as alone as you think." Koresh didn't answer. Her legs shook beneath her, and she sat back on the bed. Marcus turned toward the door, but paused with his hand on the frame. "You can leave when you want. I won't stop you. But if you stay, we move tomorrow. Somewhere safer." "Safer for who?" she asked again. A faint smile touched his lips, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Both of us." The door closed behind him. Koresh sat in the fading light, staring at the fire. Her people had taught her that humans were monsters. She had believed it all her life. And yet, the man who saved her didn't feel like a monster at all. That was dangerous. Night had barely faded when Koresh woke to the sound of boots. Not Marcus's slow, careful steps. These were heavier, faster, more than one pair. The floorboards trembled under them. Voices drifted in from outside, sharp and commanding. Her breath caught. "Soldiers." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face tense. "Under the floor," he whispered. She stared at him, unsure if this was a trap. His eyes locked with hers, serious, urgent. No time to argue. Marcus knelt and pulled back a thick rug. Beneath it was a narrow wooden hatch. He lifted it to reveal a dark crawl space lined with dirt. "Go," he said. Koresh hesitated. It felt too much like being buried alive. The pounding on the door made the choice for her. She slid into the space, biting back a hiss as her wounded side scraped the edge. The hatch closed above her, plunging her into darkness. Through thin gaps in the wood, she saw Boots step inside. Marcus Hawley. A voice barked. You've been reported for harboring contraband. Marcus's reply was calm. Contraband? You think I'm hiding supplies out here in the woods? Not supplies, the soldier said. Survivors. Koresh pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing her breathing silent. The air in the crawl space was thick and stale. Every sound above her felt amplified. The creak of boots, the clink of weapons, the low murmur of voices. The soldiers moved through the house, opening cupboards, kicking at furniture. One of them stopped directly over her hiding place. She saw his shadow shift. He tapped his boot against the floorboards. What's under here? Koresh's pulse thundered in her ears. Storage, Marcus said without hesitation. Tools. Firewood. The soldier crouched. His fingers brushed the edge of the rug. Koresh's hand tightened around the small knife she'd kept hidden. If he opened the hatch, she would fight, wounded or not. A shout came from the other room. Clear here. The soldier straightened. We'll be back, he warned. The boots moved toward the door. A moment later, the sound of marching faded. Into the trees, the hatch lifted and light spilled down. Marcus reached for her. Out, quiet. She crawled up, dust clinging to her hair and skin. Her voice was sharp. They were hunting me. They were hunting anyone they could trade for rations or credit, Marcus said grimly. But yes, they were hunting you. Her chest rose and fell quickly. They will come again. Then. We leave now, Marcus replied. Koresh studied him, searching for the hidden motive again. He had risked himself twice now. If the soldiers had found her, they'd have executed them both. Why? She asked for the 100th time. Marcus gave the same answer as before, simple, maddening. Because you're alive. He shouldered a pack and handed her a cloak. We travel fast. And we don't stop until we're somewhere they'll never think to look. Koresh took the cloak, but her mind was already racing. The soldiers would be back. And when they returned, they wouldn't. Knock. The forest swallowed them whole. Marcus moved with the quiet steps of someone who'd spent years avoiding trouble. Koresh followed close behind, the heavy cloak hiding her alien features. Every sound, every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves felt like an alarm. They walked until her legs trembled, then stopped beside a narrow stream to drink. Marcus crouched to fill a canteen, and for the first time since they'd fled, Koresh really looked at him. The stubble on his jaw was thicker now, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He hadn't rested once since saving her. You should sleep, she said suddenly. Marcus smirked without looking up. I'll sleep when I know we're not being tracked. They are tracking us, she said flatly. He handed her the canteen. Then I guess I won't be sleeping for a while. She took a long drink, the cold water easing the tightness in her throat. Why risk so much for me? You're still alive, he said again, but softer this time, like there was more to it than the words. They moved on. As the day passed, the forest thickened, shadows stretching long across their path. Koresh began teaching Marcus a few Zalari. Words as simple ones like water, danger, and safe. He repeated them with surprising accuracy. In return, he taught her human phrases she didn't know, smiling faintly when she stumbled over the pronunciation. By nightfall, they found shelter beneath an overhang of rock. Marcus started a small fire, shielding its glow with stones so it wouldn't be seen from afar. The flames painted his face in warm light, softening the hard edges she'd seen before. Koresh sat across from him, watching the fire dance. In my world, she said slowly, sharing words is a sign of trust. In mine too, Marcus replied. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy, it was almost comfortable. A distant howl broke the moment. Marcus's head snapped. Up, not human, he said, scanning the darkness. Koresh's hand went to the knife at her belt. Predator? Probably, Marcus said. He shifted closer to the fire, his eyes never leaving the tree line. Without thinking, Koresh moved so her back was to his, the way soldiers covered each other in battle. Marcus glanced at her, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding. Born in war, but not of the same side, the sound faded. And they stayed like that, back to back, until the forest was quiet again. When they finally lay down to rest, Marcus spoke into the dark. "You're not what I expected." Koresh turned, her head slightly. "And what did you expect?" "Someone who'd kill me the second she had the chance," he said honestly. She considered that. "I still might." He chuckled, a low, tired sound. "Fair enough." But Koresh didn't tell him the truth. The thought of killing him no longer came as quickly as it used to. Rain fell hard that night, drumming against the rocky overhang. The fire had been reduced to glowing embers, and Marcus sat sharpening his knife, the sound of steel against stone steady and quiet. Koresh sat a few feet away, watching the rain stream down like silver threads. They thought the storm would keep them hidden. They were wrong. It started with a flicker of movement, too fast to be the wind, too deliberate to be an animal. Koresh's eyes narrowed. "We're being watched," she whispered. Marcus didn't look up. "Where?" She tilted her chin toward a dark shape just beyond the trees. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Stay low." A crack of thunder drowned out the sound of footsteps, but Koresh could feel them closing in. She slipped her knife free, crouching as Marcus moved to the edge of their shelter. A voice cut through the storm. "Marcus Hale, by order of the Northern Command, you're under arrest for aiding an enemy combatant." Soldiers emerged from the shadows, their armor glinting in the flashes of lightning. There were 6 of them, more than enough to take down 2 exhausted fugitives. Koresh's gaze darted past them and froze. Standing behind the soldiers was a man in a hooded coat, his smug expression barely visible under the rain. She recognized him, the neighbor, the one who had seen Marcus bringing supplies to his home days ago. Marcus saw her expression and understood. Instantly. "You sold us out," he said, his voice low, cutting through the rain. The man shrugged. "Survival, Marcus. Better you than me." Koresh's grip on her knife tightened. Her people had a word for such men. It meant snake that bites its own nest. One soldier stepped forward. "Hand over the alien, and maybe we'll make your execution quick." Marcus didn't move. Koresh hissed under her breath. "Marcus, before." She could finish. The soldiers advanced. Marcus moved first, slamming into the nearest man and driving him into the mud. Koresh lunged at another, her knife flashing in the rain. The fight was brutal and messy, the storm masking their shouts, the lightning revealing flashes of metal and blood. One soldier grabbed Koresh's injured side, and she bit back a scream, twisting to slam her blade into the gap in his armor. Marcus fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, knocking one soldier unconscious before another tackled him to the ground. "Run!" Marcus shouted, shoving the man off him. Koresh hesitated. For half a heartbeat, long enough to see a soldier swing his weapon toward Marcus's head. She threw herself at the attacker, knocking him aside, but not before the butt of the rifle slammed into Marcus's ribs. He staggered. The neighbor shouted through the chaos, "Don't let them escape." Koresh grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled. "Move!" They crashed through the undergrowth, the soldiers shouting behind them. Rain blinded them, mud sucked at their boots. But they didn't stop, not even when branches whipped their faces and the cold bit into their skin. Only when the pair. Sounds of pursuit faded did they finally slow, both gasping for breath. Marcus was clutching his side, each inhale sharp with pain. "You're hurt," she said. "So are you," he replied, his voice strained. They stood there in the dark, rain dripping from their cloaks, the storm still raging around them. The betrayal still burned hot in Koresh's chest, but beneath it was something else. They weren't just running from soldiers now. They were running from everyone. They didn't stop running until dawn bled into the horizon. The storm had passed, but the forest was soaked, every leaf heavy with water. Koresh's cloak clung to her skin, her legs trembling from exhaustion. Marcus leaned heavily against a tree, his breaths ragged. "We can't keep going like this," she said. Marcus nodded once, though his eyes scanned the trees as if expecting soldiers to burst through at any second. "There's a place few know it exists. Off the maps. Neutral ground." "Neutral ground?" she asked warily. He met her gaze. "No flags, no soldiers. Just people who don't care where you came from, so long as you can pay your work." It sounded like a lie. It also sounded like the only hope they had left. They walked in silence, the forest thinning until the land sloped downward into a valley. At the bottom lay a cluster of weathered buildings surrounded by fields. Smoke rose from chimneys, the scent of baking bread and wood fire drifting toward them. Koresh's steps slowed. "If they see me," Marcus cut her off. "They'll see you as someone who survived. That's all that matters here." They approached the edge of the settlement. People glanced their way but didn't stop them. A man chopping wood gave Marcus a brief nod. A woman carrying a basket of herbs looked Koresh over without expression, then walked on. It was strange, no hostility, no fear. Just life. Marcus led her to a small cabin at the far end of the village. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, it was simple: a bed, a table, a stove. Warm. Safe. Koresh stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning every shadow. "Why?" "Bring me here?" Marcus closed the door behind them. "Because I told you I'd get you somewhere they'd never think to look. And because—" He hesitated. "You're the first person in a long time who made me feel like I wasn't just surviving, like I was living again." The words caught her off guard. She didn't reply at first. Instead, she walked to the window, watching the villagers in the distance. "I was ready to die on that battlefield," she said quietly. "When I closed my eyes, I thought that was the end. But now—" She paused, her throat tightening. "Now I think I want to see what happens next." Marcus's voice was soft but steady. "Then stay, as long as you want." She turned to face him. "If I stay, I help. I work. I'm not someone you keep hidden like a secret." He smiled faintly. "Deal." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two people from opposite sides of a war, bound by choices no one else would understand. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light into the cabin. Koresh drew in a slow breath. It was the first time in months that air didn't taste of smoke or fear. It was a new breath. And for the first time since the war began, she wanted to take the next one.